Good evening, I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. This is the week after the election. We begin to measure what was wrought last week and look at the lame duck that will be the setup, the preparation for the 112th Congress. I'm joined by my colleague and co-host, John Avlon of the Daily Beast and CNN. Mr. Avlon, you had an excellent election last week. Independents wandering around between these two warring sides. They're rearming, so it's a chance for us to get out on the battlefield while they're removing the bodies and look at the lame duck. Right now, how do you measure this lame duck between these two sides, the victorious but still minority Republican Party and the defeated but still massively majority Democratic Party?
I think the Democrats' to-do list is shrinking by the day because, frankly, their political upside is also diminished. This election was such a historic repudiation of Democrat unified control of Washington. And I do think that's the right way to read this election. It is Americans' preference for divided government coming out again, but in a massive sweep. I mean, numbers that dwarf the 94 Republican Revolution in terms of the House, and it goes deep. I mean, Democrats lost every single demographic category, so there's not a whole lot for them to hang their hat on in terms of making some proud last push.
The decision by Mrs. Pelosi, we'll have a chance to discuss that in just a moment with Michael O'Brien, because that's pushed the two other leadership positions in the majority, Steny Hoyer and James Clyburn, into a contest with each other. But right now, the decision by Mrs. Pelosi, was that something you anticipated, that she would stay on the scene?
No. I really thought it would have been both the better part of valor and far better politics for her to say, the voters have spoken, I appreciate that I have been campaigned against in uniquely personal terms, and it's time for me to go. And indeed, Nancy Pelosi was always a very flawed leader for the Democratic Party. I mean, here you have literally the San Francisco Democrat, who has been, Republicans have campaigned against the stereotype of a San Francisco Democrat since 1984. She was not incidental to the amount of the Democrats' loss. And for her to stick around with essentially a defensive agenda, I think is really bad news for Democrats. It's bad politics, and it's creating a massive conflict inside her conference, which she doesn't need and nobody benefits from.
Harry Reid stays because he was successful in his re-election campaign. Congratulations to Harry Reid and his campaign, because they saw what was not seen from the outside, that Sharon Angle was a fatally flawed candidate, and that as unpopular as he was in Nevada, he could win through. He now remains the majority leader. Is that a good thing for the Democrats, that they have the same commanding team in place going not only through the lame duck, but into the 112?
No, and the only people who are saying it's a good thing are Republicans, and they're right. Because, look, Obama, Pelosi, Reid was the troika, but Obama's numbers have always been decidedly, almost twice what Pelosi and Reid's were. And so for Democrats to want to go back and battle with Pelosi and Reid, this isn't a case of high approval ratings and a wave election. This is a big strategic vulnerability that Democrats are choosing, and there's really no rational reason for it.
The Tea Party, the uninvited guest, and now there are measures in all directions. Later on tonight, speaking with Steve Moore, who had a conversation with Jim DeMint, and it's Mr. Moore's opinion, this is the chief financial writer for the Wall Street Journal, that Jim DeMint is a kingmaker. I like that, but I do want to measure the Tea Party past the easily reelected senator from South Carolina. Is the Tea Party a Republican beast, or is this an animal that wanders around in the pasture with no master?
The Tea Party has always been a conservative populist movement, which is to say that it is to the right of the Republican Party. It has never been an overlay with independent voters as a whole. Although certainly conservative independents fall into the Tea Party camp. So Jim DeMint is their de facto leader to the extent they have one. I think they've got multiple leaders all throughout the country. And he certainly was a kingmaker. But it's important to appreciate that some of his choices, in particular Sharon Angle and O'Donnell, I think essentially cost the Republican Party control of the Senate. This is the first time since 1930 that a party has won the House and not captured the Senate. The wave was big enough that they absolutely should have and could have captured it. But you look at those candidates, the crossover votes. In Sharon Angle, 20% of Brian Sandoval, the Republican governor of Nevada's voters, voted for Harry Reid, split their ticket.
Right.
In Delaware, Mike Castle, running statewide in 2006, that Democrat wave year, won 57% of the vote. Christine O'Donnell wins 40%. So it is clearly that some of those candidates could not convert to general election, and that was an obvious problem.
Let's talk about the independent success in the Senate. Mark Kirk all of a sudden he's starting to mention that he could support campaign finance reform as the Democrats understand it. We knew that Mark Kirk was a moderate, and his nomination for the Illinois Republican Senate seat back March is a way of drawing a line as to when the Tea Party became powerful. They became powerful after last spring. They were a late spring, early summer phenomenon in the Republican Party. Mark Kirk is very close in these days, in these partisan, or as you write, Mr. Avlon, hyper-partisan days. Mark Kirk is very close to an independent in the Senate, and so is Mr. Brown in Massachusetts. Yes. What is the place for them going forward, with the Tea Party now clearly involved in making decisions in the Republican Senate, with the Republican establishment very, very concerned about moderate votes and votes where they go with the Democrats? What now for Kirk and Brock?
This is the great underappreciated story of this election, and I think going forward. The centrist Republicans, and you know I prefer the word centrist to moderate because the word moderate's terrible, those folks are what you need to play if you want to win a Senate seat in Massachusetts or in Illinois, where the Democrats squeezed out the gubernatorial election, but Mark Kirk was able to convert a win in the general. These are folks who can find a lot of common ground with Tea Party supporters if the Tea Party and the centrists stay focused on what unites the Republican Party and unites independent voters. Fiscal conservatism, fiscal responsibility, strength on national security. The dividing line is on social issues, and that has always been the fault line. The often unspoken fault line between the far right and the centrist Republicans. And you're right to say that, look, Mark Kirk and Mike Castle were running as a conceptual team to take Obama and Biden's seats. You needed centrist Republicans to do that. And Castle would have won in Delaware, and Mark Kirk was able to win Barack Obama's seat without a lot of support, especially in the primary from the far right, because of social issues. That is a huge win. That is a huge win. And Republicans should be celebrating much more than I think they are the fact that they took Barack Obama's Senate seat.
Right. And I want to just go quickly to California. We'll have a chance to talk about it tonight, later on. But this, and you've been on CNN for a week being asked this question, so I'm going to ask it in a different fashion, all right? California voted in the government it deserves. It is comfortable with Jerry Brown. It is comfortable with Barbara Boxer. Good. However, California's problems cannot be solved at the ballot box. California's problems are in Sacramento.
Yes.
Does that mean that Jerry Brown and Barbara Boxer are involved in that, or are they separate from the Sacramento problem? How do you measure? I'm trying to be generous about these two lawmakers, because both of them are experienced. They both have the Rolodex. Well, these days you just say that it's a list in your email. But they both have to make Sacramento effective. But is Sacramento ready to meet Barbara Boxer and Jerry Brown halfway?
No. And take Barbara Boxer out of the equation. It's really a Jerry Brown issue because it's a Sacramento issue. Jerry Brown campaigned essentially the way that Andrew Cuomo did in New York, by saying that, look, I may be a Democrat, but I'll pull a Nixon in China when it comes to the public sector unions, that I've got the connections and credibility to rein them in. That is a very, very hard sell. And especially in the case of Jerry Brown, a state that is so deeply dysfunctional, that has such looming immediate fiscal crisis issues. The fact that he's trying to come in now and say that I'm the man to solve it when I helped create it, that is a tough sell, ladies and gentlemen. The only good news is he doesn't have anything left to lose. He's 72.
John Avlon of CNN and the Daily Beast. We're going to turn to the House Democratic caucus next. That is massively in the majority over these next weeks in the lame duck session. And there is now an open question about an election for leadership between the very popular James Clyburn of South Carolina and the very popular Steny Hoyer of Maryland, who are competing for the same job, minority whip in the 112th Congress. There are other issues all attached to the Congressional Black Caucus, which is now a very large part of the Democratic Party in the House of Representatives come the 112th. I'm John Batchelor with John Avlon of CNN and the Daily Beast. This is the John Batchelor Show.